First, though, would like to talk about J.D. Vance's vacation, the VP's vacation in the Cotswolds, well, in Britain, really, generally. So let's talk from the Heritage Foundation. That's a think tank based in Washington, but I believe he's over here in the home country at the moment. He is Nile Gardiner. Welcome, Nile.
Thanks very much, Kevin. I'm actually in Anchorage, Alaska at the moment, so just...
Yep. Excuse me, Nile. I'm just going to sack my producer. Do you mind? Because I said, is he in Washington? She goes, no, he's here. So anyway, well, she's giving me daggers now. Anyway, well, you're on site, so excellent. Well, we'll talk about that in a little while, because it's very important. But J.D. Vance, the Anglophile vice president, he loves this country. He's got a reputation for giving us a hard time, but I think his criticisms come from love, not hate. I think he adores this country, hence taking his holidays here. So he's been here. You could call it a working holiday. He's been seen in a few farm shops, enjoying the scene. He of course, went fishing with the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy, down at Chevening, the Foreign Secretary's official residence. I don't know if you saw the story, but they should have had a fishing licence, and they didn't. So they're both facing £2,500 fines. I hope they don't get that, but quite an amusing sideshow there. Also, by the way, David Lammy didn't catch any fish, but J.D. Vance and his kids did. Another victory for America.
No surprise there, right?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, he's not even any good at fishing. But let's talk about the more serious side of this vacation. It's a sort of semi-working holiday. He's been meeting British politicians. So he saw Nigel Farage, Reform UK, of course, this morning for breakfast. But the most interesting side of this was that he's met up with not the Tory leader, Kemi Badenoch, but with the Tory Shadow Justice Secretary, a man on manoeuvres, make no mistake about it, a man who's eyeing the top job, Robert Jenrick. Now, apparently, Kemi Badenoch said, oh, I'm sorry, I can't make it, I'm too busy. We have sightings of her on the Isle of Wight for some reason. But I'm just wondering, who knows what the truth of this? Apparently there was a scheduled clash or something. If I was the leader of the opposition, the leader of the Tory party, I don't care what my other appointments were, in order to meet the second most powerful person on the face of the planet, the Vice President of America, and arguably the next President of America, I think I would make sure I got to see him. But Kemi Badenoch, apparently not. Do you think, though, Niall, I suspect that J.D. Vance was probably happier to see Robert Jenrick than he would have been to see Kemi Badenoch. I suspect that J.D. Vance might sort of look at Jenrick in the way he probably sees himself, the next boss. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Kevin. And of course, J.D. Vance did actually meet with Kemi back in December in the United States. And so they had a meeting back then. I don't think there's been a meeting since that time, actually. And as you point out, of course, Robert Jenrick is a major rising political star with a tremendous social media presence. And a lot of people in America, I think, watched the videos that Robert has posted in recent months about huge levels of crime in London, for example, and what the French are doing, knifing Britain in the back over the small boats coming across the channel. So I do think that Robert Jenrick is becoming a well-known political figure in the United States now, and so it's natural that J.D. Vance is meeting with Robert, and I think they have a lot in common, and I expect that was a very good meeting, actually. So that, I think, that makes a lot of political sense there. They're both, I think, figures with rising political stars on both sides of the Atlantic. So it makes a lot of sense.
Do you think J.D. Vance will be the next president of the United States?
Well, that remains to be seen, and President Trump, of course, has not,
I
directly
know it
endorsed.
remains to be seen, Niall.
Um,
Do you
and
think
uh,
do
but
you think he will be the next president?
Well, and I think he could well be the next president of the United States. I mean, he's a very compelling figure, a very charismatic figure, and I think also with regard to JD Vance, if you look at his Munich speech, of course, back in February, that was one of the most important speeches ever delivered on European soil by a US leader, and so he's somebody with a deep understanding of international affairs, what's happening in Europe. He's very concerned, of course, about the assault on freedom of speech in Britain. And I think that JD Vance is absolutely right to point out that what's happening in the UK is fundamentally dangerous, frankly, locking people up for their tweets. And I think he's 100% right to be pointing this out. And he's someone who cares deeply, I think, about the future of Britain and the special relationship. That's a big positive in my view.
Yes, indeed. There's a story out today that's just hit the Times today that the Trump administration has let it be known that it's very concerned about about human rights in Britain, and of course freedom of speech and freedom of expression. So this kind of cultural fear that our American friends have about the decline of freedom in Britain, I think is a very real thing. As you say, JD Vance made that very clear in that keynote speech in Munich to gathering of all the European leaders. He was addressing all of them, saying, all of you are on the wrong track when it comes to freedom and freedom of expression. But he particularly attacks Britain. And a lot of people, a lot of the papers here said, oh, he hates us and all this kind of stuff. Well, I think, as JD Vance is proving right now, where's he taking his vacation? Great Britain, England, as Americans always call the whole country. I think his criticisms of this country and his worries about Britain don't come from a position of kind of American contempt or, hatred or dislike. I think his criticisms and fears come from an attitude of love. I think he loves this country and he's genuinely worried about it. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. And the fact that he's in the Cotswolds, he's chosen, of course, England as the location for his family vacation says a great deal. And I think that what we're seeing in Washington right now is a great deal of concern about what's happening in Britain, but also the whole of Europe. And Europe is moving in the wrong direction on so many fronts: freedom of speech, but also mass migration, Islamification. And JD Vance is paying very close attention to what's happening here. And many American conservatives are very concerned about the future of Europe. After all, this is the cradle of Western civilization in Europe, and there are great concerns over the future of Europe, and JD Vance, I think, is leading the charge in terms of condemning the way in which the left are trying to destroy Europe today, and that includes what Keir Starmer is doing in the UK, frankly, and JD Vance, like President Trump, very pro-British, believes in the special relationship. President Trump will be over in the UK in September 17th and 19th for the state visit. He's the most pro-British president of the modern era. And I think that Vice President Vance shares Trump's overall approach towards a special relationship, which is a special relationship really matters, it's important, and Americans deeply care about it. And that's a great thing.
Totally agree. Now, you are in Anchorage in Alaska, so you're on the scene. Well, before we actually talk about this meeting itself, tell us about the atmosphere there. What these kind of events tend to attract huge entourages. Entire towns are converted, ready for the meeting of these two great men, the two most powerful men on the face of the planet, arguably. What's the atmosphere like there?
Yeah, it's an interesting atmosphere as the world's media is flooding into Anchorage as we speak, and every single, I think, hotel room is booked in the city already, and so this is, I think, one of the most important summits, frankly, of the 21st century so far in in many respects. I think the fact that President Trump has forced Putin to the negotiating table is a demonstration of how effective Donald Trump has been actually as the leader of the free world. I mean, no one in Europe could force Putin to the negotiating table, but President Trump is doing that. I would also point out that, of course, President Trump as the leader of the United States is a far more powerful figure than Vladimir Putin. And there's just a huge gulf really between the world superpower today, the United States, and a sinking, declining Russia. That doesn't mean, of course, that Putin's not dangerous. He's very, very dangerous, as we've seen in Ukraine. But there is a massive gulf between the United States today and a Russia in decline. And Russia is no longer, of course, a superpower. It's being eclipsed dramatically by China in Asia. But you know, Putin is a huge troublemaker on the European stage, and I think Trump is reining him in right now, frankly, and that's a good thing to see.
Bear with us, Niall. We're going to play Trump making his latest comments on the upcoming meeting with Putin, of course, which will actually happen on Friday. But here's Donald.
No, it was always going to be I was going to meet with President Putin, and then after that I'm going to call the leaders and President Zelensky. I'm going to call President Zelensky, and then I'll call, probably in that order, the leaders. There's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting, which will be more productive than the first, because the first is I'm going to find out where we are and what we're doing. Again, this is Biden's war. This isn't my war. He got us into this thing, and it should have never happened. This war would have never happened if I were president. But it is what it is, and I'm here to fix it.
Biden's war. Well, Niall, on Friday they come together, as you say. This is a testament to the power of Donald Trump. He has made this happen. But then again, you know, there have been talks all along the line between America and Putin and Russia, and they've constantly come to nothing. And Donald Trump, a couple of times in the last month or so, has expressed his extreme frustration with this, actually being quite disparaging about Putin at some point. But anyway, they're going to be in the same room. Zelensky isn't going to be there at first. Trump saying that if we get anywhere, maybe with a bit of luck, he can get him into the room. But what do you think it is that Trump imagines that he can achieve when he sits down in Anchorage in Alaska with Vladimir Putin on Friday?
Yes, well, I think there's one immediate goal for the summit, and that's actually to bring in a ceasefire for the war in Ukraine. And I think President Trump is very clear about that. This is not a summit to discuss territorial issues in Ukraine. That will be decided later, and that, of course, would involve Zelensky. And President Trump spoke today about the possibility of a trilateral meeting with Zelensky as well. That could be as early as a few days from now. This meeting on Friday is all about bringing an end to the war and an immediate ceasefire, an end to the hostilities. As Donald Trump said, there will be severe consequences for the Russians if they don't agree to that. And the United States has the power, of course, to cripple the Russian economy through sanctions and tariffs, but also, of course, secondary sanctions against countries that do business with Russia, including China and India. And also, frankly, there are a lot of European countries that do business with the Russians. You look at EU continuing to buy Russian liquefied natural gas, LNG, at a huge level. So there's massive hypocrisy, frankly, within the European Union, and sanctions will be applied against anyone who does business with Russia, including some European countries. So they're on notice as well.
Isn't the territorial element kind of intractable? You know, Putin wants territory. Trump has suggested, yes, to Zelensky, to Ukraine, yes, you will have to give up some land. Zelensky every single time turns around and says, no, we're not going to give up any land. Isn't that an intractable situation?
Yeah, it's certainly an incredibly complicated, difficult situation because you're dealing with a Russian leader who, in effect, is a brutal tyrant who doesn't really care about the loss of human life. And already the Russians have lost about 1 million men killed or wounded, actually. That's just on the Russian side. I think the Ukrainians have lost around 500,000 dead or wounded in the war. So on huge levels of, of loss of life here. But Putin, up to this point, hasn't really cared about it. I think he cares more, frankly, about the Russian economy, which is why Trump is talking about economic pressure here and really crippling and humiliating the Russians economically. But as you point out, the territorial issue is incredibly difficult to negotiate this. And I think, of course, it's vitally important the Russians do not take any additional territory, that the war does not enable the Russians to make any further territorial gains. That's top priority for the United States, ensuring the war ends swiftly so the Russians do not take any further territory. It's very difficult, of course, to get the Russians out of territory they have taken, but the objective right now is to stop them taking any further territory.
And to what extent, J.D. Vance said only the other day, America is ready to walk away from Ukraine. Donald Trump has always made that point, if necessary. In a sense, to some extent, they're responding to the feelings of the American people. There's a similar sentiment in Britain. You know, we sort of say, well, okay, you know, Ukraine's very wrong, has been wronged here terribly by Russia, and we should support them as much as possible. But just like Americans, but well, especially us, we're all struggling with the cost of living, rising taxes, and we sort of feel, well, why are you know, giving billions to Ukraine, giving all our weapons to Ukraine? Why don't you concentrate on us? Very prevalent feeling in the States, to an extent. J.D. Vance and Donald Trump responding to that. So J.D. Vance said the other day, America is ready to walk away from Ukraine. To what extent do you think, in Donald Trump's mind, this is a kind of last roll of the dice, where he's going to put every effort into trying to achieve peace, a ceasefire, trying to achieve something? But if he doesn't, he will be able to say, look, I've given it my best shot. I've tried very, very hard. America now walks away. Europe can deal with this. We're out of here. Do you think that may be in his mind?
Well, that's a very important issue that you raise, and I think that President Trump's patience, of course, with Putin is running very thin, really, and Putin has behaved in an abominable fashion, frankly, and he's been very disrespectful, I think, in President Trump's mind. And as for the future of Ukraine, I think that there's certainly a growing view here in the United States that this is a war in Europe's backyard. US resources in the defense of Europe will be increasingly, I think, focused upon the defense of NATO territory. And of course, it's up to European leaders to decide if they want to, you know, continue with a war that has already dragged on for many years. But I don't think there's much willingness, frankly, on the part of the Germans or the French, for example, to fight some kind of ground war in Ukraine. And I do think you've seen a lot of empty talk and rhetoric coming from European leaders, a lot of saber rattling. But at the end of the day, European militaries are incredibly weak. The United States, of course, has to really defend the free world on multiple fronts, from Europe to Asia to the Middle East. There are a wide array of adversaries the United States has to face, including the Chinese and also the Iranian threat as well. And you throw into the mix North Korea. The US is the world superpower. It has to focus on many parts of the world. And I think that, you know, with regard to the war in Ukraine, you know, Europe will have to increasingly, I think, shoulder much of the burden for that. And the United States has to focus on many other areas, and not least the rising threat from communist China, which is an immense threat in the Asia Pacific. And so the US has to concentrate very heavily on that, in addition to preventing the likes of Iran, for example, from becoming a nuclear weapons power. So the US has a lot on its plate right now and cannot be everywhere all at the same time.
Sure, sure. Listen, just the last question. I was in the States, in California for 10 years, and in LA, travelled a lot around the States, never quite got to Alaska, always wanted to. So how's that Anchorage? What's that place like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a relatively small city in a very vast state, and just flying in to Alaska, you get a sense of the massive scale of the state. Huge mountains, some of them snow-covered mountains as you fly in, and it's absolutely remarkable. It gives you an idea of the vastness and the scale of the United States, and the sense of greatness of America, really, in so many respects. And Alaska really is stunningly beautiful, has to be said.
And the people, I think, are what they call down to earth and fun.
Yes, very down to earth, very friendly, actually.
Oh, yes.
And I think Alaska has a great spirit about it, actually, and it's great to be.
Fantastic, unusual place. Listen, Nile, great to talk to you. Really interesting, and good luck on Friday. Nile Gardiner there from the Heritage Foundation up there in Alaska ahead of the big meeting on Friday, Putin and Trump. It's quite something. We'll be on air, by the way, while that is happening on Friday, and we will be monitoring exactly what's happening there and bringing you all the details. So something to look forward to.